progress.
Thank you, Al. Hi, everybody. My name is Don, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's April the 9th of 1981. My home group is the Calm Down group, which I named. My sponsor is Bob B. from St. Paul, Minnesota. And the center of my life has been sponsoring people in AA for the last 41 years. That I've been blessed to do a lot of speaking and traveling and that sort of thing, and that's a wonderful gift. But that is not what feeds me. What feeds me is sitting with one alcoholic, one-on-one, going through these 12 steps and watching the miracle happen one more time. Or as Dr. Carl Jung might have said, watching the massive psychic displacement, or words to that effect. I don't claim to be an AA historian, but I think it was Roland Hazard that was told first by everybody that he encountered that he was hopeless, including Young. But Roland grabbed at one last straw. He said, "Doctor, is there nothing that people like myself can do?" And Dr. Young opened a door that's become a wide gateway that saved millions of lives. When he said, "Yes, we don't understand it. We don't know what it is, but occasionally there's some sort of change in the way of a massive psychic change in alcoholics. And those people seem to be able to stay sober." And that's mainly, I think, what I'm going to talk about tonight in our code. My topic is love and tolerance of others is our code. And that's not just a sentence, that's a statement on page 84, that is the code of Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to joke with some friends of mine out west who sponsor in a lot more structured way than I, that things like accountability and responsibility are wonderful, and they have a very, very real spiritual aspect to them. But our code is not accountability and responsibility. Our code is love and tolerance for others. And when you look at the whole picture, it couldn't be any other way, because the back somewhere around page 62, I think, in the third step, we are told what our problem is. It's selfishness and self-centeredness. That's our problem. And we already have been told by that time, on page 20, that our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon the constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Now that, folks, from a self-centered alcoholic who thought only of his own comfort and happiness and material well-being, to a place where it is my goal, which I fail at many times a day, and that's okay, but it is my goal to constantly think of others and what I can do to be of help to them. Because that is the secret. That's the magic. That's the massive psychic change, is that instead of thinking about ourselves and being obsessed with ourselves, we begin to think about our fellows. And now, God is all wound into that. particularly in my story, God is wound into the code of Alcoholics Anonymous, because when I got here, I was a really hardcore evangelical agnostic. I was so hardcore that I had accepted step one at least 2 years before I elected to open my mind to step two rather than to go ahead and die. But how that is connected with me is that one day I was thinking, and a quote from the Big Book came to me. And that quote is, God is love. Well, I'm a language guy. I love to play with language. If God is love, then love is God. And that opened such a door for me, because I didn't have a bit of problem seeing love itself as a higher power than myself. And that developed later on to a much more concrete idea of a higher power. And to me, there is no real separation between my relationship with God and my relationship with my fellows. If I am not in harmony with God, I will not be in harmony with my fellows. And if I'm not in harmony with my fellows, I will not be in harmony with God. You know, the only part of God that I can ever see or talk with is you guys, God's other kids. You guys, I believe every one of us has a spark of the divine in us. It manifests itself in many ways, and it's got many names. It's called conscience. It's called a moral compass. Conventional Christians tend to call it the Holy Spirit, better angels, a lot of different names. But my favorite name for it is the spark of the divine, that little piece of God that is in each one of us. And human relations, I believe, successful human relations, are largely based on that little piece of God in me connecting with that little piece of God in you. Going back to the code itself, love and tolerance of others. I don't think that's talking about feelings at all. I think it's talking about behavior. I can't make myself feel tolerant of something that just, really gripes my butt. I can't make myself feel tolerant. But I can and do make myself behave tolerantly, which is the only thing that matters. Because this old crazy picture show in my head that I think is so important has never one time in 79 years left a footprint on reality. It's just will-o'-the-wisp swirling around in my head. Let's just say, like an old crazy picture show. The least bit of breeze will change it, and it has no power in reality unless I abdicate my behavior to that old crazy picture show. Now, if I abdicate my behavior to that old crazy picture show, my behavior leaves a hideous footprint in the middle of reality. In my story, which many of you many of you all know, backs that up. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to AA and how it worked for me. I was never able to be comfortable inside myself because of my ego disorder. That's what the book talks about when it says that selfishness and self-centeredness are the root of our troubles. That's my ego disorder. And what that means is that there's something wrong with me that without divine intervention, I'm going to ultimately think about me. I'm going to do the exact opposite of that little sentence on page 20 that says that our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon the constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. And love, just like tolerance, the love that counts is not the love I feel. Feeling love is a wonderful thing, and it makes it so much easier to do the right thing. But in the final analysis, the only love that leaves a footprint on reality is the love that I do. And I can't count, couldn't begin to count, the dozens, probably hundreds, of people that I have encountered in Alcoholics Anonymous in the last 40, almost 2 years, that my initial reaction was kind of like making my skin crawl. Oh my God, they're going to ask me to sponsor them, and I'd rather somebody put a snake on me than have a fool with that fellow. But I have never once told one of those people no. I've told every one of those people yes. And I have proceeded to apply the prayer of St. Francis to that relationship and to all my relationships. And the primary part of it is to seek to love, comfort, and understand the other person rather than seeking to be loved, comforted, and understood. And the second part of that may be more important than the first part. But boy, when I can pray silently in my head until that magic switch happens, and I'm no longer thinking about me. I'm not thinking about how I sound or what you think of me. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. I'm not thinking about 3 or 4 unrelated things on different tracks. For just a little bit of time, I'm giving you my entire interest, attention, and love. And my AA hero, Chuck Chamberlain, promises that anybody or anything that I give my entire interest, attention, and love will become, for that moment at least, the most interesting thing in the world. And I started out by saying I couldn't count the dozens or the hundreds of sponsees and dear AA friends, that my initial reaction was just exactly that as far as my emotional reaction was, oh, God, no, and I got enough trouble with that this time. But I've never once said that, and I've never once backed away. I've given them love, and so many of those people are my closest friends, and I love them dearly. The dull become sincere and lovable. The obnoxious become interesting and amusing. It's just amazing when I'm looking through those glasses, when I'm looking for the good in you and everybody else, I will find it. One of my favorite stories in the big book is Dr. Paul. They call it, I think, acceptance was the answer now, but it will forever be Dr. Alcoholic Addict. To me, that's what it was the third edition. And Dr. Paul talks about the magic magnifying mind. that whatever he focuses on will grow. And whatever he does not focus on and ignores will fade away to nothingness. And it really will. It works just exactly that way. So when I focus on the good in you, focus on the little spark of God that's in you and in me, and invite the divine third into the human encounter, I've never had a single human encounter go wrong. Not that they've all went exactly the way I wanted them to him, but I've never had one go wrong. It's the closest thing to magic I have absolutely found in human relations, is to pray to love, comfort, and understand the other person, and pray not to seek to be loved, comforted, and understood myself. It changes absolutely everything. And if we want to try to live love and tolerance, I talk about the first St. Francis a lot, but 99% of the time I only talk about the part about love, comfort, and understand. But I'm going to take a minute and read the prayer from the 12 and 12 that is attributed to St. Francis. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, and boy, what a statement is that. It is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven, and that's another big statement. You know, we talk about forgiveness along with love and tolerance for just a little while, because it's been a big important thing in my life. A family member sexually molested my daughter from the age of 4 to the age of 11. And we didn't find out about it until it was over with, and it had been over with a couple of years. And I am so grateful that I didn't find out about it while I was drinking, because I have been a criminal defense lawyer all my life, and I would have sent somebody to do something that I doubt that I would have been able to live with if I had not found it then. Well, that person was on what everybody thought was a deathbed. Turned out it wasn't. Lived a while longer, but everybody thought it was deathbed, and wanted me to come to that bed, and I just didn't think I could do it. It seemed like it was disloyal to my daughter. It seemed like it was somehow approving of what he had done, and then it occurred to me, after most AA meetings that I've attended, I hold your hand and I ask God to forgive me by precisely the same standard by which I forgive my fellows. And I want to tell you that I'm not in a position to be putting any limits on God's forgiveness of me. I don't need to put any at all. And now, did I ever get to the point where I felt, oh, that's all right, I forgive me? Well, good Lord, no. But I did get to the point where I could behave civilly. I stopped having dreams of going down and squeezing his brains out through his ears. and, and I truly did act civilly and applied the forgiveness even to that. Sandy Beach, said that he forgave the man that murdered his daughter before he hung up the phone from learning that the daughter had been murdered, because he knew he had to do that. That's where he had to get. So why drag it out like that? If I want God to forgive me, I need to forgive my fellow man. That does not mean that my mind has to change altogether with regard to it. See, I thought forgiveness, like everything else, was a feeling. I'm so self-centered that I make everything about how I feel, but that's the standard of everything. And the fact is, how I feel never one time leaves a footprint on reality. It doesn't make a bit of difference in the world. It's what I do and the way I behave. And when I behave in a manner to do that, then I'm opening up the door to God forgiving me. And now, tolerance. I thought if something was just aggravating me some, but I was able to shrug it off and go on, that was tolerance. That's not tolerance. That's a high threshold for aggravation. Tolerance is not on the table until every fiber of my being finds it, by God, unacceptable, and somebody's got to do something about it, and I think God just anointed me. That's when tolerance comes on the table. It's when it takes every bit of spirituality and contact with God that I can muster to go ahead and behave in a forgiving and a loving way. And now, part of the magic of that, there are certain things that never get all right in your mind, like what I just talked about. They never get all right. But it's a whole lot closer to all right than I ever thought it would be. But general run-of-the-mill activities in life and spats with people and that sort of thing, love and tolerance is the absolute solution to all of it. And most of you who have heard me talk before know that that I'm really, really big on courtesy. I think that courtesy and persistence are, to me, the two most important of all spiritual traits. And I found that if I am unfailingly courteous, I get into almost no human conflict. Just almost none. And I also find that being human, sometimes it's easier for me to be courteous to strangers than it is to people very closest to me that I live with. And what a shame that is. What a terrible shame. Because every little biting, sarcastic remark flying under the flag of humor leaves a mark. And then the next one leaves a mark on that, and the next one leaves a mark on that until it finally becomes a scar. So my sweet wife Sharon and I have been married over 32 years. with no intervening separations or divorces. And those of you who know my previous story know that that's an absolute miracle. And we are unfailingly courteous to one another. I know Sharon has to bite the bullet sometimes to be courteous to my raggedy buttons. But bless her heart, I sometimes think she wakes up more spiritual than I can get after 2 hours of prayer, meditation, and intensive work with a suffering alcoholic. And you know, on persistence is really critical for me on love and tolerance. It's critical on everything. Because the way my mind wants to tell me that things happen is that I have some kind of great psychic change. And then from then on, it's easy to do the right thing because I want to do the right thing. And that's a bunch of crap. I lose the thread sometimes 50 or 100 times a day. Sometimes I lose that thread and find myself in a conversation thinking about me, thinking about what I'm going to get out of it. How am I looking? You know, how you doing here, Don? You know, instead of that. But the persistence is to go right back and silently pray, your Lord, please let me seek to love, comfort, and understand, and lay aside what I'm not comfort and understood. And give this person my entire interest, attention, and love. And when I do that, as I say, it's actual magic. You can feel an atmospheric shift, actually, when that happens. Well, when you can really and truly begin thinking about and loving the other person instead of thinking about and loving yourself. And it's a marvelous thing when that happens. I also, just with regard to courtesy, here's how important I think it is to me. Number one, I am absolutely convinced that it is impossible for me to be discourteous and spiritual at the same moment. Maybe you can be, I don't know. But I do know that I cannot be discourteous and spiritual at the same moment. And courtesy gets me so far down the road to loving and tolerating my fellows. If I'm just always courteous, I got a big head start on all that. On loving and comforting them and not worrying so much about myself. I want to tell you about the persistence and how it's kind of worked in my life. I had somebody mentioned, before the meeting started, mentioned workshop that Bob B. and Bill P. and I think it was, and I did in Minnesota decades ago on step 6 and 7. And that was after there had been a huge change in my life that had to do with 6 and 7. I had been led through the steps. I'd been told that the action that is the 12 steps is the prescription for alcoholism. That action works on alcoholism precisely like an antibiotic works on infection. They explain that if I had an infection that's going to kill me if it's not treated, but will respond to antibiotics, I don't need to understand the origin and nature of my infection. I could learn everything there is to know about the infection, and if I don't take the pills, I'm dead meat. It doesn't matter. I don't need to understand a single thing about how antibiotics work in the human body. I don't need to believe that they will work in my body to take care of all those things wrong with me. And probably for me, most importantly of all, I don't need to want to take the pills. Whether or not I want to take the pills is just as irrelevant as all the rest of the stuff. If I take the pills as directed, I'll get just fine. And they promised me that if I would do the action, that is the first 9 steps in order to reach a state of recovery. And my original sponsor, Cherry Carpenter, for some reason, chose the period of time of 8 seconds. He said, now once you've done the first 9 steps correctly, you will be in a state of recovery from alcoholism. He said, however, in your case, Don, I would expect that to last about 8 seconds. And you're going to have to immediately start in by doing the action of steps 10, 11, and 12 in order to maintain your recovery every single day. You're going to have to do it. But at any rate, they led me through the 4th and 5th step. I formed a picture of what a spiritual Don ought to look like, I thought. By that time, I had my very own attic, and somebody had given me a Timex watch. So I went back to my attic after my 5th step and followed directions exactly. Spent exactly 1 hour reviewing the first 5 steps, and I didn't think I was summa cum laude by any means, but it seemed like I'd passed. So I got down on my knees and I said the 7th step prayer, and I believe with all my heart that was where, with God's help, I went to work on me to make me into what I had decided a spiritual Don would be. And I rolled that way until I was 9 years old. But then some things happened when I was 9 years old. And I had a wonderful life. I'd gotten my law license back. My daughter that I had no contact with at all for 3 years, lived with me all throughout high school. When I got back to Louisville, practicing law, and I was making good money and driving nice cars and so on. But that first 9 years, and I was sponsoring rooms full of people and talking all over the country, sometimes from Mountain Hood. But for that first 9 years, I was working so hard on relationships with the women folks and financial chaos, and it just kept getting worse. What I would do, I would pray for a character defect to be gone because I wanted it gone, and I had declared that it was standing in the way of my ability to carry the message. I might as well have been praying for a Ferrari automobile or a mansion. I'm praying for my own selfish ends. The 7th step prayer doesn't say a thing in the world about me working on me with or without God. It talks about God removing things. And it certainly doesn't talk about God removing the things that are making my self-centered but uncomfortable or I want gone. I was absolutely unable to see for 9 years that me praying for a character defect to be gone because I wanted it gone is the same mistake as praying for the Ferrari or the Corvette. It's praying for my own selfish ends. Because the 7th step prayer doesn't ask God to remove all my defects of character, and certainly doesn't ask God to remove the ones that I want removed. It asks God to remove the ones that stand in the way of my usefulness to God and my fellows. And I have no idea which ones they are. None at all. What I do know is that I can look back now and I can see that all of the trouble I had with particularly those two areas of life, that the fact that I managed to stay sober and got to a spot to let God take me to a better place is one of the biggest things I have to share with anybody. And it's a reason that my phone rings a lot of times. But while I was going through it, I couldn't see any of that. I could see nothing in it but nothing but negativity. Nothing but negativity and wrongness. But God takes my chicken poop and turns it into chicken salad. Does it every time. And God even takes my worst faults, drunken soul. And if I will try to cooperate, try to take that next stitch in the right place, God will weave that into the pattern of everything, and it'll all be just fine. And on the persistence deal, and then I'll shut up a little bit here, but on the persistence deal, I don't think there's been a day between May of 1990 and now that if you had asked me, Don, did you do this 6 and 7 thing well enough that it will work? Did you really try to love, comfort, and understand everybody consistently all the time? I don't think there was a single day that I would have said, I think I may have did maybe today. Every single day I would have said, oh no. I had to start over so many times. Had to start over 50 or 100 times today. Couldn't possibly be doing any good. Well, that's in my human view of things. Here's the fact of the matter. If in May of 1990, when I had that good life with some big warts on it, if God had said, Don, why don't you make a list of the best you think you can have in every area of your life? Every area, your primary relationship, which is Sharon, now your children, your reputation in law, your reputation in Alcoholics Anonymous, the cars you drive, the motorcycles you ride, the house you live in, everything. Make a list of what you think is the best you can possibly have. And I'm going to give it to you. If I had done that, and God had done exactly what was said, please believe me, I would have shortchanged myself in every single area of my life. When I'm willing to persist, when I'm willing to just keep on suiting up and showing up and starting over and over and over and over and over again, and judge myself not by my feelings. My character defects are not my feelings anymore. My character defects are my behavior. I have no control over these idiotic bad feelings that come flying through my head with some regularity. And I don't think, and I know then they're going to do a bit of damage if I don't act on them. And I cannot imagine that God would, if God is the type of entity that will put something involuntarily in our minds and then punish us for having it in there, we might as well close the meeting and get drunk. But God is not that kind of entity. And when I was willing to try to behave like a person would behave, to persist in trying to behave like a person would behave if they believe that whole prayer of St. Francis. If they really, really tried to live the code of Alcoholics Anonymous, love and tolerance of others, what God has got in store for me has always meant up being more beautiful than anything I could possibly imagine. It's just amazing what God will do with man and with my shortcomings. I'm going to go ahead and close it down. I won't have a little discussion before we close it down, but that's those are, at least on this particular day, those are my thoughts on the AA code.
Recording stop.